In this session, we're in Ceres, California, where we're going to sit down with Christine Gemperle and learn about waste reduction in the orchard. You know, we don't really think of waste when we think of our orchard products because really the tree's producing 4 different products. To the consumer, they think of the nut itself. That's what they're buying in the store. But we're also producing a shell, a hull, and the tree wood product as well. And we're finding new homes for this product. In this example, Christine's going to share with us how she took and redeveloped an old orchard and let that old orchard become life for the new orchard by grinding up the trees and reincorporating into the soil to really build soil health, to set new yields, increase yields moving forward, and improve her water holding capacity. Hello, today we're out with Christine Gemperle and she's going to give us a tour of her farm and teach us what she's doing here out in the farm. And maybe to start off, tell us, how did you get into this?
Well, my dad is an almond farmer, so I grew up in this. And even though we didn't live on the farm because it was in many different places, we spent a lot of time going from orchard to orchard and seeing the work my dad was doing. So later on, when I grew up, I decided I wanted to get into farming, and my brother, who's 6 years younger than me, became my business partner. And we work this farm that right now we're on 40 acres, and we work this farm completely by ourselves. And we have another orchard off-site down in the Gustine area, and that keeps us busy too.
And all almonds, or do you have other crops?
We specialize in almonds.
And what got you to choose an almond?
Well, my dad was an almond farmer. So it's basically what I grew up with and what I knew. It felt comfortable. I love it.
So how many years would you say you've been on the farm? I mean, your dad got it when?
Well, my dad started farming in the early 70s. But this piece, Eric and I, we purchased this piece on our own in 1998. So that we've been here for, 23 years now on this farm.
So when you took it over for your dad, what kind of transition was that? I mean, that's a big thing. That all of a sudden, Dad, I've got a farm now, and it's my responsibility. And
well, he basically was our coach through the whole thing. He was still farming his own property at that time. So he still had about 400 acres that he was completely responsible for. And then Eric and I came along and we bought this 40-acre piece and we started our own operation. And he was always coming in and consulting with us and telling us what we were doing right and wrong.
So you started off with no trees at that point?
No, it was a mature orchard when we bought it. It was actually quite an old orchard. The last piece, which is straight out there, was planted in 1960. So some of the trees were behemoths, really old, a lot of wood.
And we're going to be looking into new planting. So you just did a replanting, it's been a couple of years ago.
Yes, it has been a year and a half since those trees were planted.
And what was that decision like to make that? You've taken this orchard, you grew it through maturity, now it's time to, we got to replant. What was that process like to go through that?
Well, we decided to do whole orchard recycling because at the time that was kind of a new practice coming in line and really being discussed and researched by the Almond Board. And to me, it seemed like an absolute no-brainer to take all the woody biomass and put it back in the soil. I just couldn't imagine why that didn't make sense.
So Christine, it looks like you've got a lot of things growing here other than almonds. I think we would call that cover crop. Maybe speak to, why you made a decision to plant cover crop, how you did it, how it works for you, and kind of share some on that.
Well, about 8 years ago, my cousin told me that, you can get free clover seed or free mustard seed from Project APSM. And I was like, really? Okay, I can try that. And I went through a lot of different mixes that I tried in the orchard. I went through a lot of different methods of how to get it into the soil and when to put it into the soil and when it did best. And over time, I learned a lot about cover cropping. So the benefits definitely were great for my beekeeper. absolutely. And my bees did great too when I had them. But then I learned over time that it really kind of helped my weed control. It helped with actually keeping down the weeds that I felt were problematic in my orchard because they were outcompeted by the cover crop. The other thing I found, and this is more of a recent discovery, is I've noticed that the insect population is quite different in the orchard. When I'd be mowing it down at the end of the season to prepare the orchard floor for harvest, it was all these lacewings were coming up, and you can look now and visibly find ladybugs everywhere. And still it's blooming right now, so we have bees in here from somebody's colonies nearby. So they're in here getting the nectar and making some honey.
So looking around, I see there's a lot of activity going on in the cover crop. There's bees, but there's other things. What's that like? What kind of new habitat have you given by doing the cover crop?
Habitat's the right word. Right now, I think of my orchard now is this new ecosystem that I have here. It's filled not just with bees, but there's all sorts of beneficial insects in there. You have some predator insects like lacewings and ladybugs, and probably the six-spotted thrip. And these are all insects that prey on the insects that are problematic for us as growers. I've been able to I haven't had a mite problem in my orchard for years. In fact, last year, I completely cut out using any crop protection materials for that last year. And then of course, with the benefits from the weed control, I've been able to, back off on some of my weed control measures that I take as well.
So you've made a habitat for good pests.
Right.
That like to get rid of the bad guys then.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all about finding balance, and sometimes it takes a little bit to figure that out and to figure out how to time things so that you're keeping the beneficials in the orchard really when you need them.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Initially you put it in for bees, but it sounds like there's a lot of other things that cover crop covers, right?
Right. And even beyond the insect population that's changing in the weed control, of course, there's the soil health, with legumes, because I like to switch. I have half of my rows in mustard and I have the other half in clover. And then every other year I switch that. You have nitrogen fixation going on with the legume crop, but also the roots. And going down into the ground, some of the mustard plants are daikon radish, and you have these giant radishes going into the soil. And so that eventually breaks down, creates more organic matter in the soil. The roots themselves help with water penetration. And I think overall the water holding capacity changes over the years. It stays moist in this orchard for a really long time, even during the heat of the summer.
You can feel that when you walk around, that the temperature's cool in here.
Right.
And it's soft. It's spongy soil
It
compared
is.
to, I've been in a lot of orchards that are just really hard pan,
Rock
really hard. Right.
Definitely. I'm really looking forward, and when we redevelop our other orchard, which we're going to start next fall, I'm really looking forward to using cover crop there to improve the soil. Because even though, it's a long, slow process changing your soil. And I'll have that orchard for 25 years, but I'm even thinking like 25 years from then, the orchard after that, of course I'll be like 75, but that soil is going to be great for that orchard.
Yeah, so this is a practice that you started for this one purpose, but we're seeing all these side benefits from one change.
Right.
So I see a lot of diversity. Was it hard to decide what to plant?
Every year, if they have a new one, I like to see if I can try it and just to see how it works, see if it's better, see if it's worse, see if it times out right with the way I like to time it with the bloom before and after. There's been a few that have been a little bit harder to plant because they have really big seeds, and I kind of have this like really simplified grass seed spreader, and it's not strong enough to do the really big seeds. But other than that, I haven't had problems with any of the mixes as far as growing. Some just seem to be more voluminous, and some actually seem to handle drier conditions or sunnier conditions. Like out in the front in the smaller trees where there's a lot of sun, the vetch actually seems to do okay under those conditions, whereas the clover might be a little too hot, the sun a little bit too strong for it at this point.
Yeah, so you're doing this with your brother. It's just the two of you working here, is it?
Right.
What's the process like time-wise to do this? It's one more thing to do in the spring or in the fall. What's that process like? I've seen your system. It seems like you've got it down pretty well.
Well, I've been doing it for 8 or 9 years, so there's a lot of trial and error in there. So the process is, in the fall, after harvest, I try to get the mustard rows in as quickly as I can and time that with my last irrigation that I'm putting on. So as we're wrapping up the season. And so the mustard gets a head start because I want that mustard to bloom in January so that when my beekeeper brings his bees in January, there's something for them to eat here. There's something for them to forage on and to really start to build those colonies up and get them strong so that they're ready to go when the bloom hits.
And doing it that way, you're not irrigating at that point.
No,
right?
at that point.
You're letting rainfall
Exactly.
irrigate, so you're not utilizing irrigation water to get them going.
I mean, my whole thing with cover cropping is if I can get it to go on, time it for, rain events, a little bit harder if we're having a dry year, but even in this year that was a dry year, I was able to do this cover crop without any additional watering.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
So you've got a pretty good stand going right now. How long do you leave this in place? You reincorporate it back into the ground when you do that? I mean, what's that process like?
The mustard I'm going to start incorporating probably in the next week or two, just mowing it.
Right. Okay.
I'm not going to till it in. I'll just mow it, and then over the summer in the course of, watering the trees, it eventually just breaks down on the top of the soil. And then sometime in May, I like to do it in phases so that I always have a little bit of something. And it's all pretty much mowed down by mid to late June, because then I want the month of July to really just kind of keep everything, mowed and continue to break it down so that it kind of disappears by harvest. And then I have a clean orchard floor to harvest off of.
And then you go through harvest and it's time to start thinking about doing it again.
Exactly.
Yeah, and 8 years, that's a lot of time. Your first year, you probably didn't see a big change, I would imagine. It takes time, right?
No, but this is really interesting because on the front piece, I had been, probably before we took the front piece out, I had been doing cover cropping there for about 5 years. And even before that, we always mowed it and kept just the weed population under control in the middle. But when we took it out and we first started, working the land, you could see the visible stripes where the centers of the rows had been and where the cover crop had been. It was visibly blacker, darker.
Already a benefit.
Right. So over those years, the soil in here, in the centers, had just been getting richer and richer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So speaking of the front piece, which is just in front of us, that's where you did the whole orchard recycling.
Yes.
And that's a fairly new thing over the last decade or so.
Yes.
What led to that decision? What was that process like, and how is it different than what we used to do as far as when we redeveloped acreage?
Well, back in the day, like when my dad was farming, they used to tear out orchards, push everything into piles, and then burn it. This is a long time ago. And then California moved to cogeneration. So all of a sudden, there was an opportunity for us to make a bioenergy and for it to actually pay for a lot of that process that was taking place to take the orchard out. And so that was great for the farmer because it didn't cost him anything. But now cogeneration is California is choosing cleaner sources of energy. We have a lot of sun here, so we can do a lot of solar. We got wind, so we have a lot of opportunity. And without cogeneration, we needed something to do with our orchards. A researcher, Brant Holst, started looking at recycling whole orchards, and he was funded by the Almond Board of California years. I mean, right now I think it's over 8 years of research and data on this. And you're right, it's really a process. You knock over all the trees, and then you get this giant chipper in here, sometimes these huge tub grinders. You can stick whole trees in them. I mean, it's a little boy's dream to watch, like big equipment moving around,
Yeah.
really loud. And so they grind up the whole orchard. The mountains of chips they are like mountains. We had huge ones over here, and when you were standing on top of them, you were actually taller than the trees that we were under.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. It was fascinating to watch. And then you spread them all over the ground evenly, and you start to work them into the soil. So we started with a moorboard plow, just basically flipping. Actually, we started by putting some natural fertilizer on it. But it's great stuff. Anyways, because the wood chips do take quite a bit, as they're breaking down, they do take quite a bit of nitrogen in the process from the soil. And so sometimes you need to add extra. But after, we spread the chips and put our nitrogen source down, we flip the soil with a plow to get those chips underneath. And we're really lucky that year to have a good wet winter. So a lot of that breakdown occurred in those first 8 months. And we started, working it until you could actually, by the time we leveled it and got the rows marked, you wouldn't even know that there had been an orchard there before.
Amazing. So we took what was a waste product.
Waste.
And we turned it into a beneficial product. It's really setting
It's not a waste.
Right.
It's an opportunity.
In the past, but we thought of it as a waste product. We've got to take a cogen, get it off the property.
Right.
We've discovered it's really the starting of that new orchard. It really gets that new orchard going.
Right. These trees have done great. I can even tell last year when because I did put a cover crop in between we did a fall plant. And after I planted those trees and I got the ground prepared, I put my cover crop in there. And we did not have a really wet winter last winter, but that cover crop did pretty well. It actually did really well with the few rains we had and the way they were spaced out. There was mustard as tall as me in there, not to mention all the peas. Sometimes you can eat your cover crop. It's great during a pandemic.
So we've gotten to the point where there's no waste leaving the orchard anymore. It's no longer waste, as you said.
There's nothing that's
every
waste.
part of the tree, every part that's being grown we found a home.
Yes, and we're finding even more homes now.
Yeah.
I'm really involved in the biomass working group, and I love it because our objective is to make our industry this zero waste industry, and we've found so many amazing uses that could really be huge in the future. Of course, we've always provided the holes as dairy feed.
Right.
That's been around for quite a while, but now we're looking into feeding other animals. So in a sense, we're starting to share our footprint with other industries, and then the shell has a lot of opportunity to be used in plastics to make them more sustainable.
And I saw last year one of our leadership students did a trial using it in rubber for the shaker heads.
Right.
Injecting it, which is a great use for it.
Yeah. It's basically allows you to make a durable, strong, and more heat-resistant plastic without using as much plastic. And you can use recycled plastics, which are really considered low quality, low grade, and you can make them into a high quality product.
Excellent. So looking at this new planting that you've got it in now, is it something you'd recommend? What were the costs like doing it? What's the big benefits that you got out of it? Just a general sense of how's it working?
Well, I would recommend it 150%. Now, keep in mind, it is a very lengthy and expensive process. But there are grants. California, we're lucky enough to live in California that offers grants that help to pay for some of those expenses. But the changes to the soil, the magnitude of the change is phenomenal. I mean, normally when you try to change your soil, it's like throwing pennies at the national debt because you just can't really put on enough organic matter to really make a change.
It's really hard to improve organic matter.
But here, when you recycle a whole orchard, you are able to put on 45 to 80 tons of organic matter and incorporate that into the soil. So there's not really too many farming practices that
will
really
give you that.
That will give you that. Because think about it, if you were to bring that to a piece of property, you'd probably be using just as many fossil fuels. But here, it's already here. It's right on site.
And it was given to you by your previous trees.
Exactly.
They gave back. They gave that new life to the new orchard. Yeah.
So one of the benefits is that we're finding is it increases your water holding capacity by up to 20%.
So we were talking about measuring your soil moisture, and it's just when you measure, you learn a lot of things. So I know that you've participated in the California Almond Sustainability Program. It's a program made up of 9 modules or chapters that we do an assessment of how we're growing in the field, what we're doing, our practices are. Can you kind of talk, what was that experience like? Why do you like CASP? You're very engaged with it, and how's it help you?
Well, I discovered CASP actually, I think in the first year that they started it, and they were inviting growers to come in and do some of their chapters. And I think at the time there were only 4, and there's one on irrigation. And what I learned through it was that, oh, look at, these are all practices that other people are doing. Yes, I'm doing this one. No, I'm not doing that one, but I want to know more about that one. So it was actually a really great learning experience
Somebody
for me.
else was doing it.
Well, if it was
what's
on
that
the
mean
list,
for
somebody
me?
must have been.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it helped guide me in directions that maybe I might not have known about. Like I didn't even know what a VFD was, which was a variable rate or
Variable
frequency drive. Yes, I'm terrible with acronyms.
Yeah, so everybody knows a variable frequency drive works with your pump, and it utilizes exactly the amount of power you're using, not the rated load of your pump. So if you're irrigating a smaller block and you need less power, it's essentially a rheostat for the pump. Yeah.
And it helps you save energy.
Yes.
It's a very efficient use of energy. But that was just an example. I mean, other things were cover cropping. So I was able to go and said, yes, I'm cover cropping. Okay. And at the end of doing all the modules, now we have, so the Almond Board of California has our 4 goals. So at the end, you can go to a tab and it tells you, based on all your practices that you've put in, how well you're doing at getting to those goals.
And it takes time.
Oh, yeah.
Change takes time.
This is all of it.
But it gives you a benchmark for today, where you're at.
None of it happens overnight.
Right.
I mean, just like growing an orchard doesn't happen overnight. These things nature is something, it goes at nature's pace. So we have to be respectful of that and learn to work with it. And so that's what we're doing here.
And I applaud you. Filling out the sustainability program, it's a lot of questions. It takes some time.
Yeah.
But like you said, you really learn a lot through going through the process.
The hardest part for me is actually saying CASP because I have a lisp. So,
Excellent.
So other than that,
it
wasn't that bad. There's a few things I had to ask my brother, because he's more expert in that field, especially when it came to anything that had to do with sort of mechanical knowledge.
And we really encourage growers to go in and reassess themselves within CASP about every 3 years. And are we moving down the path of improvement? And it helps us tell our story.
Right.
We as a board get an aggregate of data so we can understand as an industry how we're doing. And it's been a great report card for us.
It's been great. Yeah. And in those, some of the questions change over time because we learn so much through all the research that is going on.
Like whole orchard recycling.
Exactly.
There's new questions around
Yes,
that.
okay. When I first did it, whole orchard recycling, there were no questions about whole orchard recycling because the research
practice.
paper wasn't even out on it. It was it was in its infancy.
Yes.
So that's what I say, sustainability is a moving target. We're always learning.
As a member of the board for the ABC, or the Almond Board of California, can you speak to that a little bit? What got you to get involved with the board? Where do you see us going as an industry? That kind of stuff.
Well, I've been on the board for about 3 years now, and I'm a grower representative, so I represent growers.
Where the board's made up of both growers
and handlers.
And handlers, okay.
Yes. So it's been a great learning experience, especially working on the different committees, like the biomass committee that I mentioned before, and now the nutrition committee. But it's a great way to engage with other growers and also to really understand the industry inside and out. I feel like I have this deep understanding of how it all works, and really from the ground up, especially, being a grower, of course, I know about all the stuff that's going on in the orchard, but through the board, I'm actually able to learn about what's up and coming, which is very exciting, and actually share that with other growers that I come across. And that's one of the things that I love the most.
It sounds like you would really encourage that for other growers, obviously. And even you mentioned being on a committee. Committees are really important to what we do. They really help us craft our mission.
Absolutely. The committees that's where all the work happens. I mean, yes, the board is doing work, but then we branch off into our committees and the areas that we are actually really strong in and specialize in to get the work done, whether it's a harvest working group or on the nutritional committee with health or in global marketing. So that's
a really important aspect of
it is. It is. It's very well organized, I have to say.
And we provide free almond snack packs for you when you come into meetings,
I know,
right?
And that helps you from falling asleep in the afternoon after lunch.
Yeah.
Did you know that? There was a study done on that by the nutritional committee.
Farmers want to farm. Like I said, we have 17 different species in our cover crop mix. I think traditionally it used to be like we'd grow rye or we'd grow beardless wheat. But with this variety of species, you've got radishes, you've got mustards. The radish basically, as it expands in the soil, it opens up. And after it's terminated, it basically decomposes and becomes part of the biology and the health of the soil. And that is critical, to get the biology back into our soils where these trees, pick that up. And that's part of this nutrient-rich process. I think that as these trees become more biologically strong, we add to what we have in our product that we sell as an almond.
Thanks for joining us in the orchard. We hope you enjoyed learning more about soil health, whole orchard recycling, and on-farm waste reduction. Join us next for our closing session, Working Together for a Sustainable Future, featuring a live Q&A with our growers.